Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Spar&Brawl. Hope you're having a decent day. And as usual, I'm joined by my co host, Sam. So, Sam, since the last time we spoke about Iran and the nuclear deal last Thursday, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken met with his European counterparts, and even more importantly, perhaps, the chief of the IAEA visited Iran. So, can you give us a little update? What's happened the last 2 to 3 days when it comes to the Iran nuclear deal?
Of course, of course. As I don't know if people have been watching our videos, as we've been reporting, Iran officially announced that they're going to stop honoring their commitments to, additional protocols that they have signed up to with the international community. So they're going to basically reduce their cooperation with the IAEA by 23rd of February or Iranian calendar 5th of Esfand. So that was the official position of Iran. Because of that, European foreign ministers and the US Secretary of State had meetings. IAEA Chief Rafael Grossi came to Tehran, and it was officially under, they said it's technical talks. It wasn't political talks. It was technical talks on how they can perhaps continue some sort of a supervision while Iran reduces its commitments at the same time. And in the end, it actually turned out to be like that. They came up with a deal that for 3 months, there is going to be reduced commitments from Iran, reduced. Let me give you the details. Well, uh, this is what Rafael Grossi said.
And
Their
sorry, one
access to
quick question, Sam. And how is it being promoted in this agreement? What's the word that they're using for it? Are they saying agreement or what?
Yeah, yeah, it's been described as an agreement or a temporary agreement. You know, uh, Grossi said their access to nuclear facilities will be more limited, and they will no longer be allowed to conduct last-minute snap inspections, which was uh, something that Iran signed up to as part of the deal, as snap inspections to check out the nuclear facilities. He also added, this is not a replacement for what we used to have. This is a temporary solution that allows us to continue to give the world assurances of what is going on there in the hope that we can return to a fuller picture. As far as I understood, this was from Persian sources. From what I understand, there are, for example, as part of the deal, there are cameras in Iranian nuclear facilities that record everything that goes on and send it to IAEA. From now on, these cameras are going to continue to record in a more limited capacity, and the videos are going to be kept in Iran. If within the next 3 months, US eases some sanctions or all sanctions, depending on how negotiations or secret negotiations go, then those videos will be sent to the IAEA and to the agency, right? If not, they will be destroyed. That's how, at least that's how the Iranian government, the elected government, has been describing it. So it's basically both sides meeting each other halfway in a way. It kind of reminded me of the deal between the Northern Ireland peace deal, because they had to go through a similar situation because they had to destroy their guns at the same time that British troops were withdrawing and all that. So it's a very, very, very uh, tiny step in a perhaps in a positive direction in terms of they are negotiating, they are engaging with each other, it seems.
Very interesting. And can you just clarify that little part? You said that inspectors will no longer be allowed to carry out snap inspections, or they will be now?
No, no, they
They
won't,
won't, no.
won't be allowed.
Okay.
Before that, Iran, I think, is the only country which has allowed snap inspection of its nuclear facilities. No other country. But from now on, for the next 3 months, they won't be allowed to do it. So that's a win for Iran in some ways. It's important to mention that, like before it was interesting that before they reached this agreement or this new deal or whatever we want to call it, both sides were sort of ramping up tensions. In Supreme Leader said that Iran is going to enrich uranium to whatever level it needs or it may find necessary. America was also sort of dragging its feet, and they kept saying that it's returning to the deal, just returning to the deal, not implementing the deal itself. Returning to the deal is going to be a long process. So, both sides are it's a very slow game of chess, very slow game of chess, it seems.
Okay, very interesting. And so, what have been some of the reactions, both in Iran and outside of Iran, to this agreement?
In Iran, somewhat expectedly, the parliament is not happy at all. The Iranian parliament right now, we had an election about less than a year ago, and um, in that election, basically conservatives managed to take control of the parliament, and it was actually the parliament that had passed the law that the legislation was that Iran must expel all foreign inspectors from IAEA by 23rd of February, 5th of Esfand, if sanctions are not lifted, right? That was the law that was passed by the parliament, right? So that was the position of a very conservative parliament compared to the sort of a centrist government that we have. Now they are very angry, and they've taken legal action against the government, basically in the judiciary, and they're suing the government, saying that they shouldn't have agreed to this agreement, and now they're going to go to courts. I haven't recently read up on Iranian constitution or Iranian common law precedents and all that, but from my understanding, as far as I know, Iranian government is based on the constitution and precedent is allowed to conduct independent foreign policy, and I think they would, if it goes to courts, they would win. And to be honest, this is more of a political issue. So if the majority of establishment, decides that they are okay with the agreement, it's going to go ahead. And it seems that the supreme leader is okay with the agreement. So I think it's going to go ahead. I doubt this legal action will lead to anything. But both Iranian conservative newspapers and conservative politicians were very angry, very critical of this. So these are the reactions from within Iran.
Okay, so one question before we moved outside Iran. What does it mean in the Iranian context to be conservative? Because, I mean, for instance, the non-conservative parties are also religious, for instance. So what does it kind of mean in the Iranian context?
I guess, first of all, it's not necessarily, but it may mean more religious. More socially more conservative in terms that is closer to the, let's say, original interpretations of Islam or more older interpretation of Islam. But it's more, to be honest, it's more to do with the fact of nationalism, really, and level of cooperation with the Western countries or the world as a whole. So conservatives right now in Iran are the group that are most anti-cooperation with international community and anti-American, basically. In terms of economy, to be honest, both conservatives and non-conservatives and others, they all support both state-led development and privatization. But conservatives actually might be tiny bit more pro-state-led development because, it helps them to shore up their base. Government handout is something that happened under conservative governments. The liberals in Iran, centrist, that, are for more cooperation with the West, tend to be very neoliberal. Like, I think Rouhani, besides his failures in terms of a politician in the international stage, I think the reason he was really destroyed in Iran, his image, his popularity and all of that, was largely because, in my view, because of his neoliberal policies, like presidents before him, and he couldn't stand up to big business in Iran. And, maybe he tried, but I don't think he tried hard enough. So, they are a bit more, conservatives are both socially and economically more conservative in a way, and liberals are both socially and economically. Economically, they are very liberal, very
Hmm.
liberal. But it's in Iran. You can't really. I mean, political parties are non-existent really because it's more individuals in the parliament and they differ so much from each other, their views. So you can't talk about fixed blocks so much. But there is sort of a different. How do you say? Different people have a slightly different preferences. So I don't want to. I mean, I'm giving you a very generalized
Yeah, no, no, that's
description. So yeah, I would say conservatives are socially conservative and typically uh, more religious and typically more anti-international cooperation and tend to be usually, not always, a bit more statesy and a bit more lefty in terms of
that
government
last
planning.
part is
Right?
funny. Yeah, that last
Yeah.
part is interesting, funny.
For example, Ahmadinejad was
Yeah,
a conservative, although you could describe him as a neo-conservative because he was more like he went full nationalistic and all that, and he did a couple of things that could like he built a lot of he did a lot of social housing projects which while they had a lot of failures, they did. I think they it was about 4 million homes for the poor were built. I mean, there was a lot of corruption, there was a lot of waste, but he did that, and he actually long before there was talk of universal basic income, he came up with something that is called sort of a in Farsi it's called yarane, which is basically a government handout to the poor people. It's very little and it's not basic income in my view, but it's something that could be developed into a universal basic income and something that more left-wing economists are more in favor. Liberals hated that. That was, to them that was the worst thing you could do. Instead of like injecting the money into a, economic sector, they argued that you're causing inflation to rise. But I don't think, I don't know. I just think the people who were getting the handouts, I don't think they were. Yeah, I don't think they could have caused the inflation with those handouts. But anyway, so
okay.
that's a very confusing way of explaining,
No, no, no.
general trends
I got
in.
it. I got it.
Uh,
Okay, that was very fascinating. Actually, let's go back to the nuclear deal now. And what have been some of the reactions outside of Iran to this mini agreement?
Well, it was interesting. Europeans and American officials, the ones that are in power, reacted cautiously and somewhat positively. But the conservatives in Israeli government and Israeli generally, it seems, press and public were very upset with America, and they continue to be very opposed to any rapprochement with Iran. Conservatives within US were very angry. I read a couple of interesting articles. One of them was arguing that Biden administration is destroying the whole leverage that was created by Trump's actions, which in a way maybe it's correct. Maybe if they put more pressure, Iran would explode. But I doubt it at this point. I think Iran has passed the worst of it. So American conservatives were not happy with it
Or
at all.
perhaps cause more damage economically? You shared a link to an article with me that estimated what that the sanction have cost Iran around 1 trillion, which makes sense. I mean,
That's what Iran is claiming. I think it's a negotiating position, but
yeah.
Zarif officially said that Iran will want compensation for the breach of the deal to the amount of $1 trillion, which I think, to be honest, I mean, I haven't really done a study of the damage that,
You
but I
haven't
think
broken down the numbers. You haven't taken
yeah,
a
like
quick look.
half the. But for example, the deals that fell through, like there was a
Yeah,
deal
of
that
course.
Boeing even I think was supposed to come to Iran. Total was supposed to invest a car company. So I think 1 trillion may be even a
Yeah.
conservative estimate to an extent. I think I'm not sure at all. To be honest, if anybody can correct us in the comments or give us more details about that, because that's a fascinating question. What is the actual economic damage if somebody sits down and calculates and all that. That would be
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah, definitely.
So because it's interesting, I decided to outsource it to one of our viewers. Because it's interesting but hard.
But okay, so let's get back to what we know. So yeah, they were arguing that the US has lost some of its leverage by,
Oh yeah,
Biden
yeah,
has.
yeah. The conservative reaction was negative, and yeah, we are losing our leverage over Iran, and we are dealing with a extremist regime. We shouldn't trust them. Blah blah blah. The usual. So everything is pretty much going along as expected.
Well, that's good.
The
So I mean, that 23rd of February deadline arrived, and the worst didn't happen. At least it's a step in the right direction, even if it's a small one. But okay, so if I don't know if there's anything else on Iran nuclear deal in that sense, but there have also been some developments on the Iran South Korea oil money stuck in South Korea saga, right? What's the latest there? And first, share a little background what it's about very quickly, please.
Sure, sure. There is about that was a fascinating roller coaster actually these few days because the background is that there is about $7 billion of Iranian oil money payments that because South Korea used to be one of the big buyers of Iranian oil. That money uh, has been stuck in South Korea because South Korean banks say that because of U.S. sanctions, we cannot transfer this money because this money gets confiscated because due to U.S. sanctions on the Iranian banking system, right? So South Koreans haven't been able to release that money. A lot of and this may have led to the fact that Iran seized the South Korean ship in the Persian Gulf with its crew, although they released most of the crew except the captain, I believe now, because the tensions were basically ratcheting up, and Iran was basically feeling that Korea was dragging its feet. And South Korea is trying very hard to keep America happy now and then due to its own deal with North Korea, because South Korean prime minister, he's actually a pretty good prime minister, and he's trying very hard to make peace with North Korea, right? So he doesn't want to upset Americans too much. So this led to level of tensions that Iran actually seized the South Korean ship, and then South Korean Navy entered the Sea of Oman and Persian Gulf. Then you had a couple of days ago an update that there are developments. There were reports from Iranian and Korean officials that there are developments, and Korea is trying to find a way to transfer the money to Iran. And with Biden presidency, everybody was like, "Oh, now it's likely that Iran is going to get the money back, right?" So these were positive developments. Everybody was, "Oh, wow, now things seem to be working out now." Then, about a day ago, or maybe it was 2 days ago, South Korea announced that although the talks are going good with Iran and there are good developments happening in regard of transferring the money, uh, the, we the release of money will depend on our consultation with the U.S. government, right? So that was 2 days ago, and then there were the Iranians weren't happy about that naturally, but just a few hours ago, Bloomberg reported that Iranian officials have said that South Korea has found a way to release at least 1 billion of that $7 billion money, and they are looking to ways to pay the rest. So again, it's a story that keeps getting positive and negative. So now it seems that they're dealing with it, and 1 billion of it seems to have been already released. I mean, it was just reported by Bloomberg, so I mean, I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's probably a credible story.
Okay, all right, perfect. Thanks. Thank you for that,
And
Sam. Anything else?
yeah, let me clarify that this was Iranian officials said that this has not been confirmed by South Korean officials yet, as of
So,
yet.
okay, so Bloomberg is reporting on Iranian officials, based on
Yes, yes,
Iranian officials.
yeah, based on
Okay.
Iranian sources. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, it seems but I don't. I mean, it's impossible to predict the future, but I think we're gonna have a very, very long process of talks, but at the end, I mean, I was reading, I think this was on CNBC website, that most analysts think that a deal between Iran and US is very likely because both US and Iran have too many problems right now to add to it, basically. So, it seems
Okay.
likely that they're going to come back to the deal.
So maybe a blessing in disguise, but okay. All right, very nice. Thank you everybody for watching. Please share your thoughts, comments in the comment section below. And if you like this content and video, please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you in our next video. Thank you.